Today's fairy tale is the one most people are familiar with from the Christian Bible, David and Goliath. And yes, this story is a story of faith to people in Judaism and Christianity. I'm not looking at it through the lens of theology, but the lens of folklore. Because no matter what you believe, the stories in the Christian Bible do meet the qualification of folklore and mythology as we apply it to everything from other cultures. Ancient stories passed down through oral tradition that were then written down. Looking at it from this perspective is not to denigrate anyone who views it as sacred, but to explore it to learn about why we tell the stories we tell and have told them from the beginning of humankind, which is what folklore is all about. The biblical story comes from 1 Samuel 17. Saul is the king of Israel, the descendants of Abraham, God's chosen people. The Philistines, an ancient people living on the south coast of Canaan and possibly coming from Greece, they want to take over the Hebrews' land, but they don't just storm in. They set up camp, and then this one dude named Goliath comes out twice a day for 40 days saying, hey, if someone can beat me in single combat, we'll all just leave. But if I beat you, we're going to come in and take over. Now, no one wants to because Goliath is considered a giant, and the Bible says that he is 6 cubits and a span, which most scholars say would be about 9 feet 9 inches, which is very big. This often happens in folklore, that there's a kingdom and an ogre or a giant or a dragon is threatening it, and the king of the kingdom cannot go out and fight it himself. It's meant to show that they're not meant to be king, and that's the case with Saul, because a real leader would go out and save his people. So Saul is offering tons of money to anyone else who will go fight Goliath. Again, something that happens with dragons and ogres all the time. And like in most folk tales, it is a meek person, the youngest son, who ends up going up against the giant. Often it's the youngest of 3 sons, but David's the youngest of 8 sons, and his oldest 3 brothers have gone off to be part of the army, and he actually comes one day to bring them food and stuff. Here's Goliath saying all this stuff, and he's like, why is no one fighting him? The practice of circumcision was a really important part of the Hebrew nation defining itself at the time, and so he keeps saying, why will no one fight this dirty, uncircumcised man? Read it, it's in the Bible. His brothers dismiss him, but David goes directly to Saul, and he's like, yo, I'm gonna go fight him. And Saul's like, okay, here is a sword, here's a bunch of armor, and David's like, I don't need any of that. I'm a shepherd. I defend my flocks from lions and bears and stuff all the time, and I just do it with a sling. And so if I can kill them, I can kill this dude. He chooses 5 smooth stones from a stream, but he's only gonna use one of them. He goes up against Goliath, and Goliath is offended that he's this young, small dude. He's like, yeah, come fight me. I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. But David says, you're big, you've got all these weapons, but I come in the name of our God, and that is more powerful. And then it is. David slung 1 stone, struck the Philistine in the forehead, the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground dead. Since he doesn't have a sword, David picks up Goliath's own sword, cuts his head off, and raises it above his head. The Philistines run away afraid, and David carries the head to Saul, like, all right, here you go, dude, starting his path to eventually becoming the next king, which again, after the hero slays the dragon or the ogre, they usually do in folklore. But interestingly, this is not the only story where this happens in the Bible. There's another dude named Elhanan, the son of Jair, who also kills a giant named Goliath. In 2 Samuel 21:19, it said there was another battle with the Philistines at Gob, and Elhanan, son of Jair, killed Goliath the Gittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. This has led some scholars to believe that the story of David defeating Goliath is not the original, but instead a reworking of this earlier story about another dude doing it, but attributing it to David because he's going to become so important to the history of Israel. Since a lot of people don't like the idea that there have been changes to, or that there are inconsistencies in the Bible, the King James Bible in the 1600s tried to fix these inconsistencies. It adds the words "the brother of" in the story of Elhanan, so that it says there was a battle with the Philistines where Elhanan, son of Jair, slew the brother of Goliath, whose staff was like a weaver's beam. The New International Version now still follows that change with an apologetic argument, like usually as a footnote, that says that this must have become corrupt in translation, and it's probably right. There are some other discrepancies from some of the oldest manuscripts from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which say that Goliath's height is different. The Masoretic text says the 6 cubits and a span, but all of the earliest ones say 4 cubits and a span, which is 6 feet 9 inches, which is kind of more believable. Most scholars think that this was probably just a translation error. I mentioned the Philistines may have come from Greece, and in the Bible, Goliath's armor is described as kind of Greek, but most interestingly, there's a really similar story to David and Goliath in the Greek Iliad, which was written first. A young hero named Nestor fights a giant who has a giant iron club instead of a sword. The same thing goes down that an army is invading, but the giant keeps saying, whoever defeats me in single combat, we'll make our army go away. And Nestor is the youngest of 12 sons instead of 8. Both David and Nestor get divine aid. For Nestor, it's from Ares. They both kill the giant. While David takes the sword, Nestor takes the giant's chariot, and then the enemy flees in both stories. Now, this is not to say that the Bible copied the Iliad, because a lot of scholars say that the biblical writers probably had no access to it. However, we never know how and where oral stories travel. We only know what got written down and when it got written down. We don't know what people were saying or telling before then. And just because there's different versions of the same story in a lot of different cultures doesn't mean any of them necessarily copied each other. Sometimes they did travel because of trade, but sometimes it's because humans just come up with the same ideas no matter the culture, which is amazing. What this story tells me is we as humans love this underdog story. We love the idea of the least likely person being able to defeat something that seems evil and unbeatable, and with simple methods, because of faith, because of confidence, because it's right. That's the kind of world most of us want to live in. As always, check out my book, Dust Spells, a reimagining of the fairy tale, The 12 Dancing Princesses, my podcast, Folktales and Fairy Lore. All the links are in the bio. I don't know if I'll do more Bible stories in the future. Let me know if you want me to.